Hello, everyone, and good morning once again. My name is Brenda Musa, and I work with PLAC Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. This webinar series is on how citizen participation in the legislative process enhances democratic reforms. The objective of this webinar is to examine ways that civil society organizations or citizens can interface with the legislature or with the legislative arm to increase participatory governance that can um, that can create reforms that solidify Nigeria's democracy. This webinar is supported by USAID Skill and will be facilitated by two persons. So we have Nkiru Uzodi, the program manager, legislation and gender issues in PLAC, who will be doing part one of the webinar series. And we also have Dr. Adeshina Fabian Byron, who is a development specialist of so many years, and he will be taking part two. I had put the attendance link on the chat box. I'm actually going to do that again. So I hand it over to Nkiru Uzodi. I would also like to say that apart from the attendance, the evaluation link of the webinar will be put towards the end of this webinar session. Please also kindly fill the evaluation link when you see it, because we use it in assessing feedback for the webinar. Thank you so much. And once again, I would like to thank USAID Skill for supporting Nigeria's legislative process and in pushing for democratic reforms.
Okay, so I'm starting. So Brenda has already given us the objectives of this webinar, which I don't know, I feel I shouldn't, there's no point in repeating it. But as you can see from the screen, these are the objectives and it's divided into two parts. So I'm just going to start with an overview of legislative functions and how citizens and civil society organizations can engage the legislature. And Dr. Shino will take the part two. Good morning, Dr. Shino. I think I saw him on the call briefly just a while ago. So I think I'll just start with definitions, really. What do we mean by citizen participation? And then what are democratic reforms? And just like a basic introduction to the legislature. I really don't know should I say, I would have loved to get the level of, should I say, awareness or knowledge of National Assembly of participants in the meeting. So that is why I had to include this question on what is the legislature, because I didn't want to assume everybody had the same level of knowledge. So citizen participation, just getting right to it. When we talk about citizen participation, we refer to citizen involvement in public decision making. It also refers to citizens' access to participate in governance or opportunities to influence governance decisions that affect them. It's about having the right means, opportunity, and support to participate in public decision making. And the ultimate aim is to produce better democratic decisions that are crucial to the governance process. Then moving to the next slide. So stakeholders, I want to talk about citizens' participation. Really, who are we talking about? All of us. So participation can occur either as an individual. People can participate as part of an organized, individuals can participate as part of an organized community. Citizens often have different platforms through which they organize and engage legislature. And of course, we're aware of the different stakeholders or different types of civil society organizations. We have the CBOs, we have field-based organizations and business management organizations, the public media, and the rest of it. So, but I mean, public participation is, for me, is a right. So you don't have to belong, one doesn't have to belong to a formal or organization to participate. I can hear sounds. Please, can you mute everybody, Brenda, please? I think someone's mic is on. If you can mute yourself, we appreciate it. Thank you. Then how can citizens participate? There are different ways citizens can participate. Having political discussion is a means of participation. Writing letters to elected representatives is a means of participation. Lobbying, voting in elections is a means of participation. Signing a petition, campaigning for a candidate, running for office or holding public office, that's appointments, and demonstrating through marches, boycotts, sit-ins, or other forms of protests or civil disobedience. These are different ways citizens participate. For the legislature, when you talk about engagement in legislature, of course, it's quite specific. So it involves engaging, citizens engaging their legislature in decision-making and decision-making processes that allow for contribution to decisions that may have an impact on their lives. Then moving on to democratic reforms. So, of course, we all know what democracy means. It's a system of government for the people, by the people, and of the people. Reform often refers to changes and improvements to a law, society, or institution. And so when we talk about democratic reforms, really refer to areas in the democratic system that could be improved upon. Then really, the goals of democratic reforms really are different. So it could be to improve the electoral process. It could be to improve equality and inclusion, that's the participation of women, youths, PWDs, and minorities, reduce corruption and improve transparency in government, promote economic development and access to basic infrastructure, security sector reform, and then the goal could also be for better resource allocation and management by the government. Then moving to the legislature, of course, I'm sure most of us are familiar with what the legislature is and what it stands for, but really can be defined as an assembly or body of men and women that make laws for a state or nation. So at the National Assembly, at the federal level, the legislature is called the National Assembly, and at the state level, we have the State House of Assembly. And National Assembly has three basic functions, although they are primarily known as the lawmaking, they also perform other functions as representation and oversight. I just put it out here for the benefit of those who may need the information. The provision of the Constitution that vests legislative powers on the Federal Republic of Nigeria is in Section 4, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution. The Constitution also gives the National Assembly to make the power to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the Federation or any part thereof with respect to any matter included in the exclusive list set out in Part 1 of the second schedule. So I just outline certain items you see on the legislative list. It's a very, very long list. I think they're up to 68 to 60 something items. But I have to mention that currently, the National Assembly is reviewing this list, and there are certain items I think that they have passed to move to the concurrent list that both the states and National Assembly can legislate on. So I didn't reproduce the whole list, but these are examples of matters the National Assembly can legislate on. Then moving now into engaging the legislature. Like we mentioned, it's the lawmaking arm of the National Assembly. It is also the highest policy-making arm in democracy. And the legislature, which is National Assembly in our case, is seen as the government closest to the people, because it reps. I think someone is not muted. Because reps, are elected from the grassroots, from the constituencies. Also indicated the provision of the Constitution that indicates that the participation of the people in their government shall be ensured by the provisions of the Constitution. Then I think for some, they will wonder why engage in the legislature? Why is it important really to participate or to engage the legislature? And really, I mean, the reasons are many, but just to outline a few, a citizen engagement of the legislature leads to more accountability and transparency. If we want full political accountability, electoral accountability, we need an engaged citizenry and we need responsive politicians, and we can only do that if we engage them. And then there's also the improved understanding of the role of the National Assembly. I put in bracket, the legislature is key, but it's not responsible for everything. And the point I'm trying to make here is that some people, I think a lot of citizens are not clear on the role or the duties of the National Assembly. There are people who still feel it's the National Assembly's job to implement projects, to build roads, to carry out, should I say 2 years, to implement capital projects and the rest of it. And even though we see a lot of that happening in our country and our democracy, that is not a primary role of the National Assembly. So I think engaging legislature gives an opportunity to better understand their roles, the remit of their functions, what they can and what they cannot do. And of course, engaging legislature also leads to more inclusive and representative decision making. It increases public trust and confidence in the institution. I think a lot of us know that for the National Assembly, really, public trust is usually quite low. And I can say confidently, we do some perception surveys, and really, when we try to benchmark or assess the level of public trust in the National Assembly, the feedback is usually not very good. And a lot of it comes from the lack of engagement between citizens and their elected reps. And then, of course, there's also the issue of strengthening legitimacy of elected representatives. I think that's very, very necessary for building that partnership and support that is needed. Having that engagement between people who are elected and people who elected them is really, really, really key for strengthening legitimacy. And one of the reasons why the engagement is poor or mistrust is there is because a lot of citizens have a sense that maybe people who are elected lack legitimacy. So that engagement is there to tackle or address this problem. Then some of the common challenges that we've seen or that you see in engaging the legislature, I think there are quite many, but I think for me, poor interest is really one of it. And I say poor or low interest because a lot of people see legislative matters as highly complex. A lot of them are disconnected from what happens in the National Assembly. And as an organization that puts out information on National Assembly, I can see that sometimes the engagement on legislative news is not as much as you see on other topical issues. And of course, it's expected naturally that people maybe or citizens maybe get towards, or their interest maybe get towards other things, or maybe entertainment news or other issues. But even when it comes to the issue of, should I say, politics or governance, legislative issues or legislative matters, don't really get a lot of, should I say, attention or engagement. So I think, for me, that's the starting point to have effective engagement and to have results. I think that interest has to be there. And that means really paying attention to what happens in National Assembly, following the news, their calendar and the rest of it. Then there's also the issue of poor access to the legislature and legislators. This, I think, is a major issue. And when we talk about access, I talk about it in all ramifications, both physical access and, even having that working access. There are people who find it difficult to even walk into the assembly complex. And I think for people who have engaged in National Assembly, I think they can also testify to that, that's a challenge. When people have difficulty getting into the building, or do not have their legislators' contacts, or they're not able to access them, or they don't get any feedback, that can be very, very challenging, and it can be very discouraging for anybody who wants to do legislative engagement. Then there's also the issue of inadequate access to timely and accurate legislative information, which is a huge challenge because, again, you need information, you need knowledge to engage. And I think, one may actually say or ask, whose responsibility is it? Really, I think it's two ways. In one way, I think the legislature, or our legislatures, both at the federal and state level, really have a lot of work to do in putting out information about what they do, about their bills, about their motions, about legislation they pass. There's a lot of gap, or there are gaps in that area. And also on the part of citizens, people also tend not to go, ask questions. They assume that information is going to fall on their lap, and really that's not what's going to happen. Because if you don't ask questions or seek out information, really it won't come to you. Then there's also inadequate knowledge of the legislative process by civil society organizations looking to engage, which is also a big challenge. And the knowledge can be, substantive. It can be knowledge, procedural knowledge, in terms of the process of National Assembly, the calendar. I think for those of us who work with the National Assembly, you know that if you are doing any form of engagement, you have to really pay particular attention to their calendar. That's really important. You have to plan activities around your schedule, plan activities around your calendar, and really, really understand the process of legislative decision making. Then there's also the issue of non-involvement of society in agenda setting. I think this goes beyond the National Assembly, because really political parties are supposed to be responsible for agenda setting. But in a system like ours, in a country where we have weak political parties and parties have a lack of ideology, it has negative implications for agenda setting by government. Because what happens, when you have people who go into power or who go into politics without really having a list of priorities or important issues they want to tackle, when they get in there, then they are unable to engage because they don't really have any concrete issues to talk about or to engage on. So this is one of the challenges to engagement. I also have to say that when it comes to participation, different experts, they look at participation in different ways, and I think they try to categorize it because participation can happen in different ways, and there are certain things that look like participation, and they're really not participation. So, for instance, tokenistic engagement, one-way flow of information, it's a good starting point for ensuring citizen participation. But a lot of times, you can have government agencies, or you can have committees or legislators or legislatures, just putting out information, but it's one way. It's just going in one direction, just telling you, okay, this is what's happening. We're doing this. We're starting e-voting tomorrow. We're passing that bill tomorrow. We're having a public hearing. I'm sure a lot of us will see adverts for public hearing on the TV. We hear it on the radio. That's one-way information flow. It's a very good and important starting point, but that's should not be the ultimate aim. So it's not enough, although this is a responsibility on the part of the legislature itself, it's not enough to just put out information. They have to create platforms and opportunities for there to be a two-way engagement. Then again, another challenge, not sustain engagement platform for negotiation or discussion. For instance, one of meetings, town halls, engagements is, I would really love to ask this question. How many people here have attended a public hearing that they followed up on? I see this happen all the time. We see it happen all the time. And I'll give an example. The quarantine bill, which is now the public health emergency bill. I remember when it's created such a ruckus, when it was introduced during the COVID pandemic. And, there was a lot of criticism about the bill because it had provisions, that had potentials for human rights to be abused. And, it was really not a well-drafted legislation. There was a lot of, shall I say, brouhaha about it. And then the National Assembly held a public hearing. Everything was in the news. National Assembly held a public hearing, and there was quite some representation at that public hearing. But after that, we noticed that the engagement really dipped. It was as if people were not really paying attention. And I would have loved to take a poll to ask how many people actually know that that bill was eventually passed, the name was changed, the provisions were changed, and it's now improved. But the question is, how many people actually followed through to see the end of that process? So you have a bill that comes before the National Assembly, and you're saying, oh, there are provisions in it that are against human rights and the rest of it. So the question is, do we follow the process to the end to see that those provisions have changed? When you go and submit a memo, or rather when we go and submit memos to committees, do we follow up and read the text of the bill? Do we follow up to read committee reports to see that our inputs have been made in those legislations? Because really that is the one way of tracking your own work or tracking your own successes. So a lot of times there is this engagement, I attended a town hall, I attend a public hearing, I attend a meeting, and then it stops there. So that's not active participation, really. It's tokenistic, really, because it's almost like, oh, I went to a public hearing, and then you check the box. Then, of course, there's the question of the issue of no feedback channel mechanism. I mentioned this before from the National Assembly, which, I think this is the responsibility of Parliament, really, to have a feedback channel or mechanism. And I think this is also closely tied to putting out
we are just, I say you are doing punch. Even me, when I was younger, I don't know how
Please, can you mute yourself? Thank you. So Then there's the issue of no feedback channel or mechanism. Then mistrust between citizens and legislature. I think we all know, we're suspicious of politicians. Politicians are suspicious of us, especially NGOs. Most times when you go there to work, they feel, oh, you're just coming with, you're coming to represent donor money or donor interest. So those things tend to create rift or tension. But, in spite of all these challenges, the facts and the experience, across democracies, across countries, is that an engaged and active citizenry can create change through sustained actions, campaigns, advocacy, community organizing, etc. So I think this is, if you look at this part of my slide, you see where I actually outline the stages, of participation. At the first, you have inform, consult, involve, then collaborate and partnership. Collaboration and partnership should be the ultimate goal. That is where you have active participation. That is where you have citizens and their elected representatives jointly discussing problems and finding solutions as partners. Then again, like I mentioned, there are certain conditions or there are certain things that should be in place before engaging legislature or participating. I think knowledge is the very first, understanding to engage. So only citizens who have the skills, the knowledge and attitudes to participate and organize themselves can efficiently engage. Understanding legislative processes and what happens inside the National Assembly is needed for engagement and influencing the legislative process. And then identifying and understanding the relevant stakeholders or the main players in the Assembly who have real decision-making power and their networks. It's not everybody that is in the Assembly that is very influential. Lawmakers have different levels of clout and power. So it's really important to understand that and understand those people who really have that clout and who have real decision-making power. And of course, planning a well-planned engagement strategy with clear objectives. So for planning for results, I think these are things that most of us, may have heard one time or the other, because of our work, building collaboration, prioritizing engagements in area of expertise. I think this, and then finding a niche. I think this cannot be overemphasized because as civil society organizations, as citizens, you really cannot spread yourself thin. It's really important to find your niche. So the National Assembly has over 100 committees with mandates on different areas. So you have health, you have poverty alleviation, you have budgets, you have women issues, you have youth, you have social development, you have defense, even under defense, you have military, navy, police. So many issues. And then sometimes there's a tendency for people to, jump across sectors or areas or different areas, depending on which is popular. And that's not an effective way of participating because, it's expected that if you're making a contribution, you're bringing in expertise or knowledge on an issue. And, it doesn't even have to be like, should I say, fantastic academic knowledge. It could just be knowledge of your area of, from experience you have working on a local issue or working in a particular region of the country. So it's very important to prioritize engagement in an area that you are very, very familiar with and find a niche and work on that niche so that when legislators are looking for people to engage, it's very easy for them to say, oh, this person is an expert on this issue. And I think tied to that is also fostering the culture of continued learning. Then political economy assessment and environment scan. This is very, very, very important in helping to understand the political dynamics. I don't think I need to say more on that. I mean, we're watching the primaries and we're seeing how things are playing out, and even in the National Assembly and conversations about who is coming back and who won their tickets and all that. So all those things affect legislative work. Everything happening in political environments, really, it plays out on the floor of the Assembly. Then, of course, reflect and reassess strategy. Patience. I just had to add that because doing legislative work is not easy. It's not a tea party. There are many groups that have pursued legislation or pursued policies for years, decades. You hear about laws being passed after 10 years of campaign, 14 years, 15, even 17, 20 years of work and campaign. So engaging legislature definitely requires a lot of patience. The entry points, here I just highlighted the three functions of the legislature: lawmaking, representation, and oversight. And I think the whole point of highlighting this is just to mention that these are entry points already. National Assembly has 3 functions: lawmaking, representation, oversight. So, you can engage the National Assembly on their lawmaking, you can engage them on their representation functions, that's through constitutional relations, and then there's also the oversight. And even though these are 3 different functions, they are all also overlapping functions, because when you talk about oversight, most times National Assembly oversight, they have oversight powers only over issues that they have appropriated money for. So if they pass the law, then they have to conduct oversight over the implementation of that law. If they've passed the budget, they have to exercise oversight over the implementation of that budget. So these functions are really overlapping. And in the process of doing this oversight, their job is to also represent your interests. So even though there are 3 functions, they are also very interconnected. Then understanding the lawmaking process, I think, is very, very, very fundamental. I think in one of our last webinars, this came up, but I just put it just for the benefit of those who may want the information. I think, it's important to understand for lawmaking the process, the presentation of first reading, second reading, committee and report stage, third reading and assent. And it's also very important to understand that this process is not the same for every type of bill. So you have ordinary bills, you have money appropriation bills, and constitutional amendment bills. The procedure for passing these 3 different kind of bills are very, very different. And of course, for constitutional amendment, we know that you need state assemblies to ratify whatever the National Assembly has done. But at least the common theme is that these 3 bills can originate from the National Assembly, and they need presidential assent. Then opportunities for engaging the legislature. There are different opportunities for engaging the legislature, just building around the 3 functions. So I just highlighted a few. This is on exhaustive list. So you have technical assistance on bills. Consider what is happening at this stage and determine appropriate method of intervention. I mentioned that utilizing the public petitions mechanism, attending public and investigative hearings on bills and motions, assessing the impact of the laws and its implementation by the executive, then carrying out a poll or survey of citizens' view on legislative issues. This is very important for tracking legislative work. So I'm now moving into technical assistance on bills. We know that citizens cannot sponsor bills, but it can be drafted or initiated by it can only be brought, a bill can only be sponsored by a legislator. But that doesn't mean that citizens cannot initiate the idea or come up with a concept. So it's quite common to see regular people, citizens, drafting bills and sending to their legislators to sponsor on the floor. So then, but even going beyond that, CSOs can do technical assistance, which is working directly with committees in charge of bills, or even helping their legislators in their legislative offices to draft bills. This comes from the fact that civil society organizations, are knowledge generators. They can provide expert input in the formulation of policies and drafts of legislations. And also, CSOs can share perspectives, solutions, research findings, because, the knowledge of legislators they don't know everything, and their knowledge is not infinite. So, that is one of the purposes of participation, to share experiences and findings on your own work or your expert knowledge on a particular subject matter. Then public and investigative hearings. So public hearings are different from investigative hearings. A public hearing, of course, usually occurs during the deliberation of bills after the second reading, when it's committed to a committee. I have to pause to allow the person mute. Okay, thank you. So public hearings, like I mentioned, are useful for gauging or getting public inputs on bills and proposed legislation. So it's a useful tool in the consultation of the public on national issues or proposed government action legislation. It's an effective means for inclusive lawmaking and serves as an effective dialogue and feedback mechanism with stakeholders on proposed laws. Investigative hearings, on the other hand, are quite different. Investigative hearings really are investigations. It's an oversight action by the National Assembly. What it does is that it enables in-depth discussion and scrutiny of issues relating to government action. So most times when you hear that a minister has been summoned by the National Assembly or the National Assembly is investigating maybe misappropriation or fraud in an agency, usually they do that through the mechanism of investigative hearing. But if you notice at the end, I put that follow-up is key. And I put that particularly for public hearings because the experience we've had in the course of our work is that a lot of people, a lot of CSOs don't follow up after public hearing. So on the public hearing day, everybody wants to come on the podium and make a presentation and speak, which is fantastic. The hall is really so full. But after that, a lot of people don't follow up. People don't read the reports. People don't even you have to do a comparative content analysis. If you are following or tracking a bill or you're working a bill, it's important that you do a comparative content analysis of what was proposed and what came out. And that is the reason we see things like this electoral act, for instance. If you pass the electoral act and you hear, oh, we didn't know this was in the act, or we didn't know this provision changed, and the rest of it. So if it's important, of course, there's the issue of lack of communication or inadequate lack of communication from the legislature, but still, we still have responsibility as citizens to follow, to be vigilant and follow changes every step of the way to be sure of what the final output of whatever is being passed is, and also to be sure that it reflects the inputs we made and it reflects the interests and opinions of citizens. Then budgeting too is also another opportunity for engagement and participation in legislative process. So citizen-led initiatives are useful in the budget process. Civil society organizations can be involved in public expenditure tracking, monitoring budget performance and raising awareness through fact sheet reports, example, tracker and budget. I'm sure most of us are familiar with the work of tracker and budget. I think I'm not going to pause anytime I hear a sound because this is being recorded, so it doesn't interfere. So, and then audit or assessments of legislations passed to inform further review, e.g. the Electoral Act. So the parliaments or legislatures usually have this thing they call post-legislation scrutiny, which is led by them. It's not necessarily citizen-led, but citizens on their own can actually do that. And I know, for instance, like Disabilities Act, you have a lot of disability rights organizations who do a lot of assessments, to see if what has been passed is being implemented. And the same thing with the Electoral Act, just assess, especially when the law is being tested, to see if the new provisions are workable and to see if there are gaps that can inform further review. And I also mentioned supporting and participating in public hearings of the national budgets, which can be replicated at the state level. This was something that was not being practiced. And in fact, I think it was in 2017 that PLAC supported the National Assembly's first public hearing on the appropriation bill. Before then, the appropriation bill, all the conversations were held at committee level and only with MDAs. But, we told them, it's really good to have a civil society and citizens involved in hearings on the appropriation bill. So now it's now open to civil society. So that's an opportunity also for engagement. Then I also brought up monitoring the activities of the Public Accounts Committee. So the Public Accounts Committee is a very, very important committee of the National Assembly, and their job really is to scrutinize the use of public funds. And Public Accounts Committees are usually headed by members, by a member of the opposition. And the whole idea is to create a balance and put somebody who is able to speak without fear of repercussion from their party. So what they do is that they review the reports of the Auditor General of the Federation, because public agencies are meant to be audited. So this is part of the National Assembly's responsibility in ensuring that the national budget is implemented in a manner that they have approved. So public accounts committees, they usually have their oversight hearings, they have investigative hearings, and they usually publish reports on the Auditor General of the Federation. And for a long time in our democracy or the National Assembly, these reports were not being published. But I think the committees now have started publishing backlogs of reports. And if you really study those reports, you see a lot of revelations in terms of how public institutions spend money. Then, of course, there's no way we can have this conversation without mentioning the National Assembly's petitions mechanism. The National Assembly has a committee on public petitions. In the Senate, it's referred to as the Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions, while in the House of Representatives is referred to as a Committee on Public Petitions. So what they do is that they take in petitions against government agencies, MDAs, and they present it by motion on the floor of the House, and then they now conduct an investigation and they give a verdict. So CSOs and members of the public can lodge complaints to public petitions mechanism. They can monitor compliance on the committee. In fact, this committee is one of the busiest committees in National Assembly. A lot of people don't know, but they are extremely, extremely busy, and they have a very, very busy schedule. So people can track their work and report on the actions of government agencies. And in fact, in some cases, I think they've made certain verdicts where, especially cases relating to maybe people on unfair dismissal, there have been cases where they have, reached a verdict where they've asked agencies to, either pay people who they are owing their benefits or to re-engage someone who was dismissed. But I have to mention that the mechanism of the petitions committee is strictly limited to agencies that are funded by the National Assembly. So you can't bring in private matters or grievances. It has to be issues related to public institutions that the National Assembly has approved appropriations over. So that's one of the ways that the legislature can be more responsive. And petitions are always sponsored by members. So most times they are brought by the member representing a constituent. So you just go to your member with your petition and then he presents it on your behalf. And most of them are actually quite very happy. It's something they do very proudly and very happily. Then participation in constituency outreach activities. I think this is mostly at the state level. That's a way of engaging, stakeholder engagement, town halls and constituency sessions. Civil society and legislature at the state level especially can partner to facilitate increased face time between members and constituents as a means of enhancing grassroots participation in policy dialogues. Then other opportunities for engagements, again, this is similar to the oversight mechanism I mentioned, monitoring and evaluation of national projects, programs and policies. I'm not going to dwell too much because I've mentioned this before, oversight. But CSOs can monitor, evaluate, and report on the work, performance, and effectiveness of government policies. And the role of CSOs in this respect is threefold. Firstly, is to highlight areas where policy intervention is required, and then secondly, where legislative action has been taken to assess its impact, both intended and unintended, and thirdly, to inform citizens of the performance of the government on their initiatives. Other opportunities for engagement, polling and performance or perception surveys. I had listed this in the beginning. It's a mechanism by which opinion of the public is sought on an issue. So citizens or civil society organizations can use it to measure or assess legislative effectiveness. They can use it to get opinion on bills and legislation, and that is really, really key for informing your advocacy, because there are certain times you can go to the legislature or legislators and they tell you, how are we sure that this is not your personal opinion, or how many people did you consult, and sometimes they really want to know, the extent of people who have an opinion on a certain thing. And for those doing legislative training projects, surveys are also very, very important, because it's for M&E and for measuring or tracking change. But generally, perception surveys and opinion polls are very, very important for getting public opinions on legislative issues. So the results can be shared with legislators and can be used to design and inform follow-up engagement strategies. For PLAC, we do this on all of our legislative training projects. Even some of them we publish, some of them we don't publish, but it is very, very important to us, and we use it to inform and design our legislative interventions. So I think I'm soon be rounding up. So engaging the legislature, or what to look out for. So there's a basic checklist, of what democratic legislators should do to encourage citizen participation. If you go to the internet, you see a lot of it. And then, a lot of organizations that do legislative training have all these benchmarks and standards for legislatures. Well, so for somebody who wants to engage in legislature, there are certain things you need to know or you need to watch out for, because sometimes there are certain practices that we have or certain things that happen and we think it's normal, but that's not the way it should do. And, if you they are listed, and legislative building and galleries are open to the public. This is a very, very, very important marker of how open an assembly is. The records of committee meetings and plenary sessions are available to the public and distributed publicly. And I'm actually put out this list for the benefit of people who work in the states, because I was informed that not all the participants here work with National Assembly. So the record of committee meetings and plenary sessions should be available to the public and distributed publicly. Committees should actively seek public input by such means as holding public and investigative hearings. So the question is, how much of this is happening at the state level? And the legislature should also publish basic information about the legislative process and distribute it to the public and the media. I think here, a lot of our state assemblies and even the National Assembly, you know, I think are failing in this regard. I know there are a lot of time at National Assembly, you know, you go there, you get updated information. Sometimes the site will be down. I don't know what happens at the state. Not every state assembly maintains an updated website, but you know, these are things that should inform you, that you should look out for in your work. You know, how much information are they putting out there, and then as a society, what can you do? I think this was one of the things that informed PLAC's work on tracking bills, because you know, we discovered in the course of our work that bills were not easily accessible, or sometimes bills were not gazetted on time, and even if they were, you go to National Assembly, you will see some of the bills, they will be stacked in one corner, but if they will be available, but the mechanism of distributing it just wasn't there. So, you know, to help our work, you know, we decided to start also doing our own tracking and, you know, try to get copies of bills to share with the public. So for those working at the states, you know, that's something that you consider doing, you know, is the legislation publishing this information, how can you engage them to do that? And you know, how can this be solved? Because if getting information is really important. The same thing, legislative sessions can be viewed on TV or heard on radio or by the internet. I think we have NAS TV here. I think every Thursdays they broadcast legislative sessions, and the major TV stations also have segments. And again, access for journalists. So these are the things to look out for. I had to put in this slide because, you know, now we're in the pre-election season. And, you know, talking about participation engagements, I think it's really important to, you know, have that conversation in context and against that background. You know, participation is critical at this stage. So the question now is, we have assemblies that are rounding up or have been winding down soon. So the question is, how do we begin planning? Now is the time to begin planning. You don't begin planning when the assembly members are inaugurated. So how do we begin planning for engagement in National Assembly? So now I'm ending my presentation by throwing questions back at the participants, you know, food for thought, more like, how much are we paying attention to candidates for legislative houses? Are there any plans for promoting issue-based campaigns? You know, really, what are we doing? Because at the end of the day, these are the people who will end up in the assembly. And the issue that they campaign on are what will make it to the policy agenda, and then into bills and into legislation. So really, when we talk about agenda setting, it has started now. When they start their campaign, that is when agenda setting is really a critical issue, because, you know, that is when they come up with their manifestos and what they want to do. So we shouldn't wait until the assembly is set up to begin the engagement. Now is the time to start paying attention. Then again, is there any way we can use social and new media tools to enhance information, network building, and a culture of interaction and communication between these candidates and the legislators and citizens? So again, going back, some questions for assessing NAS and state assemblies is still the same thing. What opportunities exist for the public to contribute to debates? What opportunities exist for the public to contribute to budget hearings? To what extent do committees use public evidence from civil society and individuals in their investigations? These are some of the questions I think you should have for your legislatures and for your assemblies if you're planning to engage after they are set up. Then representative function, how systematic are the procedures for ensuring that they consult and communicate with their voters? Then adequate time and resources devoted to constituency work. Normally, these are benchmarking questions for us, for legislators. So they should also ask themselves these questions, but also brought it out so you can see, you know, some of the expectations or the issues or the benchmarks that assemblies really should use to assess how well they are encouraging citizen participation. Then questions for you. So again, I'm throwing it back. I think this is my last slide. So if you are doing legislative engagement, how open and accessible is your assembly at your state? How accessible are your individual legislators? How easy is it to get information about your reps' activity? Do you know what their voting records, bills sponsored, motions, petitions filed on behalf of citizens? The issue of voting record came up during constitutional amendment, especially when the 5 gender bills failed. And I know a lot of women groups are calling for voting records. So the question is, what have we done after that? And what can we do as civil society to ensure that voting is not secret because, these are people we elected. We need to know how they are voting. So what should we be doing to ensure that these information are put out? And again, are there adequate mechanisms for committees to consult the public on bills or budgets? I've talked about National Assembly holding budget hearings. I don't know what happens at the states. So are those mechanisms there, and what can we do? And then how easy is it for individuals to submit written memos and follow up? So I really think if your answers should very important in informing how you start your advocacy and engagement with the National Assembly. So I think this is it. Thank you very much. The next session is for Dr. Shino. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? You can hear me now.
We can all hear you. We can all, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Technology can be somehow. Anyway, thank you very much for your patience. And I want to thank Nkiru for the very elaborate excursion into this issue of citizens' engagement and citizens' participation. My role is really not much, but to elaborate and dig deep into some of the issues that we have talked about. But I want to start from where Nkiru left off. And it's a question of how do we leverage on the elections? And where does this come in the cycle of citizens' engagement with the legislature? And this phase we are now is what I would call the pre-engagement phase. You see, from one cycle of engagement to another cycle of engagement tells us that the bridge between two cycles of engagement and our engagement with the legislature must necessarily piggyback on the life cycle of the legislature itself. So getting in tune and getting in that flow is also a critical, critical component of what we need to do. So what I would say, this stage which we are is what we call a pre-engagement stage. This particular webinar could have come at a better time. And I want to thank Ngozi for elaborating so much on it. I will touch on some of the few things that she said already, but I will dig slightly deeper into the benefits of citizens' engagement. So let me just continue. Let me change my slide. Yes. So the issue here is a question of engagement essentially means having a say and a role to play. You could have a say without a role to play, and you could have a role to play without a say. Having a role to play without a say simply means that we are dictated, we are used, right? The citizens become instruments of oppression or instruments of constraint without they not having contributed. So we should have two caps on, having a say and having a role. And what we say is that, without having a say on how we are governed or what to expect from our government, it amounts to slavery. And it is with this attitude we need to understand our governments make laws, they execute laws, and they adjudicate on laws. Our confinement today is with the legislative arm of government. And this is the making laws aspect of it, which Nkiru has elaborately spoke upon. And citizen engagement, therefore, when it comes to making laws or engagement generally, is to give us access to both the legislative, the execution, and the determination of our fundamental rights, including things like security, justice, and everything that is there to make life better for us. Now let's start looking at some of the, the benefits. As I said, some of these things have been mentioned by Nkiru. I will just, sort of skim through them again. Now, citizens have to be empowered, So, number one, getting into a routine of engagement with the legislature empowers the citizens itself and brings respect to the citizens, when we actively deliberate on issues and stuff. But basically, the point I would like to emphasize, I will start now. Number one, it also helps us to factor in, ensure that inclusion, the point of you cannot have good governance. It's one thing to have governance, it's another thing to have good governance. One of the factors of good governance is inclusion. So by our engagement, we tend to strengthen the issue of inclusion, especially for disadvantaged groups. Another thing is the issue of being able to collect evidence and generate evidence. At the end of the day, whether it's legislature, executive, or judiciary, decisions have to be made. And decisions need to be made based on what is the actual situation, not anecdotal situation, not on the whim. And the premise of rule of law itself is that for every decision that is supposed to be taken by us, for us, on behalf of us, has to be evidence-based. It cannot be the decision that is anecdotal, fly by night, or just, according to someone's whim or caprice. So by our engaging, we also put ourselves in a situation whereby we can harness a whole range of evidence about matters relating to us. Another thing that is a benefit for citizens' engagement is the ability to create learning opportunities, to deliberate and to make informed decisions, which I alluded to before. Before you have development, you must have learning. And that whole experience of citizens' engagement, because just as Nkiru said, many legislators, many actors in government don't have perfect knowledge of everything. They rely on what non-government, non-state actors bring to the table. But the flip side is also the same. Civil society, no matter how deep we are in what we do, we don't have an all-embracing knowledge of what happens everywhere. There are certain perspectives that you cannot see, you cannot read, except you stand in the position of someone in government or someone within the legislative arm of government. Another thing that civic engagement can do, and this is actually a benefit more to the institution of the legislature itself. It's a contribution to the institution of the legislature, and that is that you strengthen the legitimacy of the legislation. A legislation that does not engage with the citizens has only a limited level of legitimacy. Now, what you need for legitimacy, why you need legitimacy is that, look, not all decisions are popular. Not all decisions that will bring good governance are popular. Not all decisions that will actually drive pro-poor issues are popular. Not all decisions that will guarantee us security are popular. But if it is a decision that is made, right, via proper citizens' engagement, then such decisions have the legitimacy to proceed. Another issue is, of course, which is the obvious, improving transparency and accountability in the National Assembly. A culture of citizens' engagement brings about a serious factor, transparency and accountability, which without a National Assembly will weaken. The question of public trust, building public trust between government and democratic institutions and the people and the citizens themselves is also an advantage. Furthermore, there are certain things. For example, at this stage that we mentioned, the end of one stage is another pre-engagement stage. Just as in Kiru, as this agenda is being set. It also always helps citizens when they were part of the agenda that is being set, rather than after the fact, when your National Assembly and State Assembly members have been elected, and then you start trying to latch on or piggyback or contest that agenda. By the time you start engaging with the National Assembly and you are not a part of the agenda, things that you need not contest, you will start contesting, and even things that you need to contest. You may not have the details, the facts, and the credibility to be able to contest that in a civil society. Okay, there are other benefits too. For example, some of what we've seen from Plaque's intervention, internships. We need to always think of succession planning, whether we are on the side of the state, whether we are state actors or we are non-state actors. Civic engagement for one generation to another generation needs to be put in a pipeline of leadership, and you do that through internships. And when we build this culture, we create this kind of pipeline. For example, the Plaque's annual legislative internship for people between the age of 18 and 35. You can imagine what will happen in 20 years' time for people who have mainstreamed themselves into this process. It becomes easy, it becomes a culture. Democracy is a culture that has to be sustained. It cannot be sustained if there is no succession fabric into the system. Then the issue of partnership. Citizen engagement builds partnerships between civil society organizations within civil society organizations, but also between civil society organizations and the parliament. And the beauty of partnerships is that when you build partnerships, look, a marriage without courtship, or a marriage where people don't really know each other, or a marriage where people don't have things they bring to the table and have developed a partnership, is a marriage that cannot work. With state and non-state actors, the citizens have to be, the relationship between citizen and state has to be that of partnership rather than contention, for development to happen both ways. And citizen engagement brings this. Now, let me just mention some key success factors. Thank you. Let me mention some key success factors of citizen engagement. And from all this, you will tease out some of the things that Ikiru was trying to say. So one of it is that when we want to engage, citizen engagement must be purpose driven. It should be based on an agenda. It should be based on agenda. There must be something that we are expecting, something we are taking to the table, an issue that we want to engage with. Is it health? What is the goal? What is the objective? Is it child's rights? What's the objective? Is it nutrition? What's the objective? Is it water and sanitation? What's the objective? Is it democracy? There must be a purpose towards our engagement. Otherwise, engagement will be not only all over the place, but without focus. The second thing is that engagements must be sustained. Nkiru had earlier said that, look, and she gave the example of that COVID-related legislature, which sort of constrains people's freedom. And the reason was simply because that we lost, there was no sustained engagement with that particular legislative bill. Another word to use is to follow through, following through. You want to see the beginning of something to the end. So in short, citizens' engagement is a marathon. It is not a sprint. The third thing is that citizen engagement has to be measured. We have to measure the impact of our engagement. There has to be parameters upon which we will say our engagement is either off track, on track, right? Or we are, we need moderation. They say what you don't measure, you cannot manage. citizens engagement, we've said it needs to have an objective. If you don't measure your pathway to that objective and what we do, then it is unlikely that the ultimate of that engagement will be met. A fourth thing is that, look, citizen engagement with the legislature is an opportunity to build relationships. Decisions are made, improvements are made, development is achieved as a result of helping to change other people's behavior. The capacity to change other people's behavior is highly predicated on the type of relationships that we have. In the common man balance, they will say it's about who you know. Building relationships between civil society groups, number one, helps them to build broader bases of action, helps them to form more potent coalitions, more effective coalitions. Building relationship between state and non-state actors, that is civil society and or citizens and the legislature themselves, builds understanding, builds more coalition around the issues, helps a better understanding. With a good relationship, you can break down barriers or break down objections towards achieving certain legislative drive or agenda. The fifth thing is that every engagement should be conclusive, right? I have seen several situations, we have all seen several situations whereby we engage, but it is left open-ended. Open-ended engagement. That is, you end up and you wonder, what exactly was this all about? What did we achieve? What did we do? What was the product? What's the outcome of our engagement? Have we shifted an opinion? Have we shifted the needle? Have we been able to drive a particular policy? Have we been able to change a particular law? It is possible we have exhaustive engagement, but at the end of the day, nothing changes and nothing happens. But it should be inconclusive. Conclusive may not mean total agreement, but at least we know where we stand on a particular thing and we know where the gaps are. And the final thing is that after citizens engagement, there must be, where does the whole knowledge of that citizen engagement, where does it feed into? And this is what Nkiru was talking about, follow up. If we engage and we change a law, the fact that the law is changed means something must be done. Either you want to start now measuring how the law or the new law is going to be implemented. If it is about a policy, you want to start looking at the implementation. Many a times we have gone and we have made changes only to raise up our hands and celebrate, but nothing is done. So that basically sums up, my own interventions here. And like Nkiru said, I want to reinforce some of the questions that we would like to throw to participants. One aspect is looking at the past, another aspect is looking at the future, another aspect looks at what we do. We want to question whether there are bills that should be passed that actually, and this comes to the substantive essence of our engagement. Are there bills to be passed to promote peace and good governance? And then we know that there are bills. For instance, I think it was yesterday that the National Assembly was looking into a bill for the old fire service. It's a 50-year-old bill. The bill for Nigerian police, how old is it? And some of these bills, we often look at the legislature in terms of engagement, in terms of new bills to, is either we're fighting new bills that may constrain civil space, or we are trying to promote new bills that have strong development or, sorry, the new bills that will promote development and promote our access to our basic rights. But on very few occasions have we looked at past bills that need to be amended, need to be repealed. Police bills, fire brigade bills, a number of bills that we see. Other questions which we need to consider is that whether previous dispensation, let us look, and this is opportunity for learning lessons. Have previous dispensations in the National Assembly, have they done enough to promote such bills? The current dispensation, what are they doing to promote such bills? Whether there are other things that should be included in the constitutional review process that is ongoing, right? That we promote good governance. And then, of course, whether CSO are doing enough. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. Apologies for the issues that we had initially. So, thank you very much. Over to you, please. Kiru or Brenda, who's moderating?
All right, Dr. Shina and Nkiru, thank you so much for that. I just wanted to say that the evaluation form on the webinar has been placed on the chat box, and it would be very helpful if we get feedback on it. Dr. Shino, it would be great if you could also moderate it if people have any questions to ask.
Okay.
All right, sir. Over to you.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. So, would you please, questions, raise up your hand. Let's see the reaction of people as they come. I have Kabiru Dakata. Could you please fire away with your question, please, or comment? Kabiru.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation and for the opportunity for me to speak. My comments are on the first presentation, especially on the issue of challenges. There's this challenge which I think was missing, and the reason why I'm bringing it is because I think there's a solution to it. The financial challenge for organizations that are working on national laws. So it would be difficult at times if those organizations are not based in Abuja or state close to Abuja, for them to finance some efforts like advocacy, like public hearing and what have you. So in the case of advocacy, we recently experienced such challenge. There was a bill we were advocating for, but we could not finance our trip to Abuja to see some legislators. So what we did, we leveraged on the legislators that are from our states, following them to their constituency offices, advocating for that, and through that, they even linked us with some legislators that are not from Kano, but living in Kano. So for national or federal advocacy, you must not go to the National Assembly because of financial issue. So you can get those legislators, at their constituency offices or in their state. Then there is a point she mentioned, which I think can best be put. She said distrust or lack of trust between the actors. I think something similar to this is there's a phobia from the side of the legislators. Sometimes the issues we are advocating, they might not be conversant with those issues. So I think in the letter of request for the advocacy to see them, we need to prepare their minds, to give them confidence and tell them we're even coming to share some understandings, of those issues, so that they get that understanding that we are not coming to like maybe trying to test their understanding on those things. Then second to the last is the issue of appropriation, public hearing on appropriation. Let me put this on record that in Kano State, we started public hearing on appropriation in 2014. And since then, it has been an annual exercise. We advocated for that in 2014, it was done. And since then, it has been an annual exercise. Lastly, is the issue of how do we know beyond our effort at the National Assembly, how do we know whether the president has assented to a particular bill or not? And like she said, some bills have different, procedures. She has not explained those procedures, especially with regard to the timing for the assent when those bills get to the president table. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Kabiru. I purposely extended the time which you will speak because you are bold enough to be the first person to speak, and you are making some very, 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 very serious points. You shared with us that challenge, that solution to the financial challenge. How we meet our legislators from source, and I guess everybody else who's had that is listening to that. You talked about the issue of trust, and this goes to speak to the issue of building relationships. When you build relationship, you start with sharing information. They know you, you know them, So that is another thing. That's one around chipping. And of course, you talked about how do you know when a bill is assented to. That is why we say monitoring. You have to monitor. I will go straight away and ask Patience Dixon, after Patience Dixon, then Martins. But please, I urge you 1 minute. Make your comment, question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, friends. Mrs. Patience Dixon here from Advocacy for Women with Disability. My question is just around the first presentation on, especially around engagement and participation. I'm just going to look at it from the perspective of organizations of persons with disability. In this regard, it is very, very difficult for some of us, especially in this community, to engage with legislation. Reason is, for me, I don't know, I might just be wrong, is because of the mindset we already have around this community. And then especially when letters are sent following the process and you see disability there, it's already labeled that, oh, they are coming for charity. But we have designed or defined a different way of strategizing this, and that is to work with mainstream civil society, so that way we can always share our own ideas with them, and then maybe we can just present our case. But on the overall, it's still drawing us back because it's not the same as always going on your own to go and engage the legislation and also put forward your own agenda. Having said that, I want to also just add the final note now, final line, just to say that some of the bills that we have, I think it is hard time that most of us, especially in civil society, to start advocating for some of these bills to be accessible to all, especially to few persons with disability that needs to also need them for engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I picked 2 things from what you said. Patience in terms of access for people with disabilities, and this is another thing where relationships come into play. I think CSO groups that are CSO that, sorry, can that person be muted, please? Yeah, so CSO groups that should always, is better to also link.
Lots of noise at the background. Can hardly hear you, sir.
Trying to mute them. There's Abubakar Zubair. Abubakar Zubairu, yes, needs to mute himself. I can't mute him from here. So, sorry, Patience, going back to what you were saying, yes, and then the issue of publication. Yes, publication of legislative outcomes is necessary. Thank you very much. Martin Hello, please, 2 minutes, please. Could you raise your hand down? Lower your hand, Patience. Thank you. So, Martin Hello. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. Let me use this medium to appreciate you and the first presenter and the plaque as a whole for this brilliant presentation, this webinar coming up at this moment. Like I rightly said in my chatting box, really the first person that talk has already asked the question of funding of a thing, and we are already see how we can maneuver. It's cover something regards to the assessing this bill of 18. If PLAC and other bigger organizations there in Abuja can help some of us that are at the state level to get this bill, we can use this bill to engage some of our national representative member up here. Yeah. Another thing that we also see in the challenges is the issue of lack of trust. I don't know why the National Assembly not trusting the civil society or public as a whole. If happen that what they are doing is for the citizen, is for the betterment of our environment, of our nation, of our states. I don't know why that they are always trying to hide some of this bill from us. Okay. The only thing you can see in the last period of for the 7th Assembly, until when they let that we heard that the 57 bill was passed. During the Bukola Saraki, it was 80-something bills. And all this law is not knowing about the citizens and the civil society as a whole. But this engagement that you talk about, that we need to be partner with them and also engaging them, we will do it also at the state level. But we still need more sensitization from the bigger NGO like PLAC to engage this National Assembly as they are doing also to the state level. Because when the state, because when, sorry sir.
I got your point, because we need to be mindful that there are other hands raising up. One thing you said is the question, you've raised the issue of trust, which is fundamental. We've talked about relationships, but you should be mindful of the fact that a legislator that is elected in a position has, politics. I have opposition members, I have people who want my position, I have that. So we cannot presume trust, right? So we ourselves have a role to play to get known. And this we have to hammer it on ourselves. We are expecting to just appear in the state of assembly and expect them to trust us. No, we have to build. There is an effort on our side to build trust. I do appreciate here that there is a lot of issues at the state level. I believe that if you listen to what Kabiru, the first speaker, said, he did mention how we can engage at the level of the National Assembly using our representatives. No matter what state you have a representative that is good for you. So, but I'm not preempting. We are taking note of your comments. We are harvesting them. I by no means belittle the comment, but I am saying that let's start now connecting the dots. Between what we say. Jude, it's your turn. Martin, could you lower your hand, please? Yes, Jude.
Okay. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for the presentation and also thank you for the nice job you have done. Mine is actually looking at the National Assembly in terms of access. And
physical, sorry, you mean physical access?
Physical access to the National Assembly can be very problematic and of course has been worsened by the security situation in the country. And that's an area to help the country, evolve better in terms of legislative work. And I think a plaque can lead in this for us to have a citizens office or hub or whatever contact within the National Assembly that can be processing entry for citizens who are going in there for legislative work. For those who have done work there, you understand how difficult it is, really. You just, it might be easier for you to, so I think it's an area we need to work on and preparation towards the inauguration of the next assembly to see how we engage and make that process a bit easier. I know the entire issue of legislative engagement will definitely improve as our electoral processes improve. So work on that.
Thank you very much. I believe that plaque has had that. I think there was a particular point in time in the history of the National Assembly that there was a citizens liaison office. Maybe we should review or revisit that. And what worked then, what did not work then, why is that liaison office not still there? However, in communicating with the National Assembly and access to the National Assembly, we should be mindful of the fact that there are opportunities for email, telephone numbers. It is also possible for you to access National Assembly through your representatives. Thank you very much. Loretta, unmute yourself and speak up. If Loretta is not okay, Loretta is there.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this session so far. I want to build up on what Kabiru from Kano mentioned in terms of advocacy. There is a contribution, actually, that while advocating, it's necessary for one to leave an advocacy, a leave behind note that is concise and that also has the key points of the visit. Secondly, is to leave a contact details, because after that meeting with the legislators, they might not, and they want to reach out to you back to continue the discussion without the contact details on it. They won't be able to do that. And one last point already, the key ask. What are the key things you want them to advocate on, you came to advocate on? So possibly 2, 3, and make your leave behind documents maximum 2 pages. Make it as concise as possible. Because with so much document on ground, they might not be able to screen through and get the necessary information they need. Thank you very much.
Loretta, thank you very much for that. I mean, these are best practices that we are hearing. We've said it that one of the key success factors of citizens' engagement is that it must be purpose-driven. You must have a purpose. And then secondly, your leave behind note. That's follow-up, which we need to be clear about. Thank you very much, Loretta. That will be taken down because I believe that as we are having these discussions, we are identifying certain best practices from some of us, our colleagues. Eunice Abimbola, it's your turn.
Okay. Yes, I have. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I want to thank Nkiru and you for the very excellent and precise presentation. I think Nkiru really has, simplified her own presentation, and a lot has been, also noticed here that most of the time we don't really engage very well with, our lawmakers, even at the state level, and then we just feel, we can just magic can just happen by having trust. So the lesson learned here today is that we need to go back to the drawing board as civil society, organize better, and begin to engage more with them. We need to start from the state level and engage more with them, and of course involve the citizens, organize, and then get our lawmakers, meet with them more regularly and then get to know ourselves. And then with that, I think it will be easy for us to make presentations and to have leadway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eunice. Thank you very much, Eunice. Eunice is also putting another dimension into how we are taking this particular webinar. There's the issue of best practices. There's the issue of also lessons learned, which Eunice has alluded to. Thank you very much, Eunice. Chima.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Thank you for that presentation. So this is a very good opportunity, and I want to let you.
Chima, we lost you briefly. Chima, you unmute yourself. Chima.
Okay. So are you hearing me?
Yes, you want to let us know.
So you just activated some feelings in us now, because when you say somebody can have a say without having a role, and then have a role without having a say. That is exactly what is happening at the state level, I mean sub-national level. When you talk about legislative engagement, our major problem is this issue of one person being in charge of the legislators. The legislators are not independent, and so anything they do revolve around one person. You see legislators' house passing some laws that citizens or CSOs are not aware of. We don't participate in public hearing of any particular bill or any particular law. So they just within a short period, the governor comes up with what he wants, and the House passes, including appropriation bills, which they don't even have any level of consultation. They don't open it most time. So it's a very big problem. But I wish that we can begin to shift towards the sub-national level to ensure at the national level. Yes, Black is doing very great work in terms of engagement. But now, this issue of, like, for example, in Ebonyi State, where I come from, our last engagement with the legislators, it was a very difficult one. Okay, right now, the House, even the clerk, find it difficult to engage some House of Assembly members, because he feel that if he engages with these people, it will be as if with PDP or APC and this and that. So it also throws citizens into confusion. You don't know who to engage with. You don't know who will engage. The governor will be happy. So governor is in charge of the House of Assembly members. So we should work towards making sure that the subnational legislators are fully independent. They can take decisions of their own. They can actually talk about issues that affect their constituents, not actually doing things that favor the governor or favor the executive alone. So that is just a problem we are going to have. So maybe as civil society, we should begin to work in that direction to ensure that there is voice, and then
Thank you, Chima. Thank you, Chima. You have raised a valid point, which I believe should form the third component of this issue that I've listed. Number one, we are identifying best practices. Number two, we are looking at lessons learned from our experience. The third one, which is resonating and which Chima has been able to fully articulate, is that the state issue, state legislation is a critical issue. Now, there are issues around that. Number one, I believe we should do more research on why do we have an accountability issue at state level? Is it because, look at the proportions, for example, in the National Assembly, you have about 300 people, that is the House of Reps, over 300 people. In one state assembly at times, you have at least 225. Now, see how easy for it to one governor who owns the pulse of the entire state to control those 25 people. So is it the numbers? Is it the representation at state level? Is it a structural issue? I think it's for us to really think about. But I think we have to do research before we start, before we really take action. And you're absolutely right, Chima, and several others who have mentioned state issues. Chinyere, please, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm speaking from Ibadan.
Excellent.
Yes, your state. And I want to really take back this discussion to us, the CSOs. We really have a lot to do. And looking at the global focus on the sustainable development goals, we realize that the main three pillars of any sustainable development have to do with the economy, the environment, and the social. And that's very key because it has to do with the people. And we talk about the people, it's not just people at the top, but people at the grassroots. And you and I are that grassroots. So most of these challenges we are having with our legislation is because we don't really go back to act on them. And one, I must commend for the work well done. Nkiru did a very insightful presentation with Dr. Shina. Now, looking at the multiplier effect of what PLAC has done, this is just one organization, and we are over here. If we can be more empowered in terms of capacity building, just like this program is going on, and we take it back to our state level, you can imagine the multiplier effect it will have on the citizen. Take, for instance, what happened in Oyo State in 2019 general election. We discovered that immediately the APC won at the presidential level, Oyo State becomes a very hot cake. It sprang up to see how is it going to work and how is it going to go. But civil society did a lot of work with the people. The ruling party then, which was APC, did a lot and felt this was a capitalist opportunity for them to also win. But because the people were sensitized, the people were educated, voters' education took place so deep that political parties were when they see you are straight, they want to support you. You will see what happened over there. They collected the money, but they still voted with their conscience, and PDP came up. And we are not into politics actually, but we are trying to say that the effect we CSO is what is key in achieving the sustainable development of this work of PLAC. Now, looking at also what happened in Kama. When the Kama law came up, we were empowered by PLAC, taking it down to the state. There was a lot of results coming out from there and reactions. Even the electoral bill, today we have it signed. So we CSOs, I want to just encourage PLAC again in this capacity building. For me, it's a take home to get more selected communities to engage with their legislatures, which I believe each and every one of us on this platform should also do. So in our next meeting, we can have a feedback of what happened and how it had gone. And if there's any challenge, I want to believe we can get help, assistance from PLAC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chinyere. You did mention something very, very interesting, and probably it can inform us why any legislature who is in power and who sincerely does not want to deliver on good governance, any effort that may be driving them to do that or holding them to account, they'll take it as enemy fire. And this is where some of the distrust may come from. So the distrust comes from both, like what you have said, your intervention. It was not your fault. You didn't want to be partisan, but eventually it led to the opposition displacing the party in power simply because of citizens' engagement. Now, what I'm saying here is that now we understand what the impact of our work can be. It also tells us that one of the best ways that we can be most effective is as much as possible to demonstrate non-partisanship, regardless. If now you continue the same momentum, and this is where we talk about sustainability, about getting citizens to continue to engage, after a while, in Oyo State, people will just get to know that, look, we just have to reckon with civil society as our barometer of whether we are performing or whether we are not. And we use them. So thank you very much. Another thing you've also said was, and giving us food for thought here, is that between now and the future of the next engagement, there are certain things that we need to identify that we want to do differently, which we should come back as feedback, and I hope PLAC is taking that note. We need to have certain things that all of us will go away with and say we are going to do this differently. No, it doesn't have to be huge. But if we have little targets in terms of the things we have spoken about, is it building better relationships? Is it doing best practices or replicating best practices. Take, for example, the example that Kabiru said initially about being able to bridge that finance issue by actually engaging with their own home-based legislature. Can one or two of us, the rest of us, do such a thing? And then we come back and report and see how it has done. Okay, Kamoluddin, it is your turn.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you. Go on, please. Sorry, I had to mute both. Please.
All right, no problem. Good morning, everyone. Actually, my own is as a rider to what Eunice earlier on said. I think CSOs also in individuals that we need to reorganize ourselves. Sometimes you see we went on engagement and a different organization will go on to maybe contradict the other one. So we need to do our homework, make sure we are not doing a one-man job, to make sure that we have one voice. And then also when you meet a particular legislature, if you are maybe more than one CSO, it's likely for him to listen to you than maybe doing a one organization thing. Secondly, I wanted to also contribute. I think there was a recent, the recent constitutional amendment has been sent to different House of Assembly for voting. And I think in my state, actually, we have been doing like a lot of lobbying around to make sure that the legislators actually vote for their own independence, because the two main content we are buying for is the local government independence, the issue of that the joint account, and also the issue of the legislators' independence. So we have been doing that. I'm not sure the status now, but I think it's something that each state, I'm not sure, maybe they have already sent, because it is far more than a month or so that we have been we have done that. And lastly, there is I think one of those meetings we went for PLAC, there was an issue regarding PLAC maybe organizing a certain capacity building in states, so that we can be able to maybe organize a network in each state to work on the same maybe direction, or to have like a similar voice, so that it will be easy for the engagement at the subnational level to occur. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kamaluddin. You've made a serious point, particularly starting from CSOs, citizens' platforms, looking internally. It is better to go and it's better to approach or engage with the legislature as a collective. But when a collective goes to engage, that is, you are more than one, you need to be coherent, right? You need to have been harmonized. You need to have a common platform. Because when you go and engage as a collective, if you are not coherent, that is when your traducers deploy the divide and rule tactics and eventually negate everything that you are speaking for. You've also mentioned this issue of state, and I think building state capacity. I totally agree with you, and I believe that PLAC is, I mean, this is why we're in this particular forum, expanding this webinar to include a lot of civil society groups, and I've had engagement with PLAC for a long time. I know that PLAC has drawn in states. But you know, I think we should also look at what is within the framework of state legislature, vis-a-vis the ratio between legislature and those they represent, the ratio between the executive and the legislature in terms of numbers. You know, how much can we do? And shouldn't our efforts be towards change? For example, one of the questions raised here was the issue of, are there any things that we can impute into the constitutional review? Constitutional review also has to do with managing state legislature. Constitutional review has to do with it is on the platform of a constitutional review that we can look at the constitution, you know, and say that
as the framework, the sections that provide for state legislature, in actual terms, do they really make state legislature independent? I know some state cabinets, that's the executive cabinets, that are larger than the entire state legislature. What do we do about that? Ladies and gentlemen, the work needs to be done, but go back to some specific questions. And this time around, we will be, I don't know how much time we have. Maybe Brenda or Kiru may want to comment on that. But if they give us a steer on how much time we have, then we'll go back to follow-up questions. This time around, I think I will be throwing some questions and asking for specific answers. Thank you. Kiru, over to you or Brenda.
All right, so I'll be giving the floor to Nkiru. And please, if you haven't filled the evaluation form, it's the link is on the chat box. And in the event you haven't also filled the attendance form, it's also there. All right, Nkiru, over to you, please.
Thank you, Brenda. So, you have to mute. Hello?
Yes, go on, please.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. So I just wanted to just respond. I think Dr. Shino, thank you. I think Dr. Shino has really done a great job of responding to all the comments. I'm just going to just touch on the ones that I think directly address Black. I think, so the very first person talked about the challenge of money. And I think he responded appropriately to that when he said, that is where you need partnership. Then someone mentioned the procedure for bills and that I did not explain the procedure. I didn't want to, I didn't want the presentation to get so extended. But there's a difference for there's a procedure for passing money bills. There's a procedure for passing ordinary bills, and there's a procedure for constitutional amendment. And I really don't want to go into that, but I just want to say that for constitutional amendment, it has to be ratified. I think that's the main difference. It has to be ratified by the states. So right now, we have constitution amendment bills that have been transmitted to state assemblies. So at least you need 24 states to say yes to each of those amendments for it to go through to the next stage. So the money bills too, they have their own, these are provisions in the constitution, we can share them when we're sharing the publications, but the same thing, passing the appropriation bill has its own procedure, especially where there are differences. So these are all in the constitution. Then whether PLAC can help CSOs at the states to get bills to engage the executive. My answer to this is, we don't work in the states. If you say you do legislative engagement really and you are unable to get bills and legislation at your states, then I think there needs to be a re-examination really of the purpose of your legislative engagement, because I think at the very least, that should be the starting point. Hello? Can I continue, Brenda?
Sorry.
Okay. Yes. So, and that is why I threw those questions back at you. It's Brenda, you have to mute your volume, please. Yeah. I think there's an echo. Sorry, please. I hope this echo is not affecting participants on the call.
Go on, please.
Yes. So the bills, I think it's really, this is a response. We really can't go to the states to get legislative documents. That's the truth of the matter, except we are doing work there, because even for National Assembly where we work, we do a lot of it. It's building that engagement and relationship. It's something. It's not easy, but it has to start from there. Because at the end of the day, the whole idea is not for one organization to be seen as a gatekeeper or to be like the focal person of all legislative work. The whole idea is that people should be able to walk in and get the documents. So I think it's important, if you're working in the state, to actually start building that relationship. And the way Nigeria is, some of these things can start out very informally. I mean, if you need legislative documents, you can do a formal request. But sometimes some of these things are things that come from relationships. If you had an engagement with a committee, the clerk, I'm looking for these documents, that is how it starts. And then you build up from there. I mean, if we could get bills, that would be fantastic to share. But unfortunately, we don't work in the States. So it's now left for CSOs who understand the political, understand the dynamics and the context of those states really, to build a relationship that will enable them to get that information. Then I think someone mentioned something about a plaque leading the setting up a citizens club. I think it was David that mentioned it. Yeah, I agree with you. So before, I think in the 7th Assembly, there was this office called CISO, Civil Society Liaison Office in the National Assembly, and that was part of their job. They process pass for CSOs, but with the way things are in Nigeria, things are not sustained. A new administration came in, a new leadership came in, and that didn't continue. But I think these are conversations that are still ongoing. And even with this 9th Assembly, those were some of the conversations we had in the course of our work, as in to see if that office can be reopened. But, I'm not making any commitment or saying anything, but this is definitely a good recommendation and the conversation that is still ongoing, and that we're hoping that office will be activated once again. Working towards ensuring digital independence. I think Dr. Shin already answered this question by asking we need to do research on why we have accountability issues at the state level. I think that's for me, that was just a very, very good feedback. Really, that's a huge question mark. But I think the good thing is, in the last assembly, they passed this amendment to grant autonomy to legislatures. So I think, maybe it's too early to assess, how far or how well this constitutional amendment has worked. But I think that, I thought that was a very, very, very good constitutional amendment. Of course, the governors are still very powerful. They are still holding on strongly, but having legislatures or state assemblies be financially independent is also a very, very key issue. And that's a challenge that we observe with a lot of state assemblies in the course of our work, especially on constitutional review. So you see cases where state assemblies, they can't even travel for activities if the government does not release funds or things like that. So I think that's also part of what our call should be, to really, really support the assembly to be financially independent, because I think that's what has helped the National Assembly, because if they're financially independent and they run their own budgets, it's easier for them to take decisions on their own. Then I think that the plaque doing capacity building in states, I think Dr. Shinori responded to that. This is the reason why we're having this webinar. We can't do capacity in all the states, but I think this is a good start, and we're hoping, the expectation is that, the lessons learned from this presentation is something that can be stepped down or shared, with other people working in the states who are not able to participate. And, we hope to have more of these conversations going forward. Thank you. Dr. Shino, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I said thank you very much, Nkiru. That was comprehensive.
Sorry, Dr. Shino, we can't hear you.
Again?
We can hear him. I can hear him.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can hear you.
Thank you very much.
Hear you.
Can you hear me clearly?
Brenda, okay. I was saying that I was reading a text from Kamaluddin. And he's raised his hands up now. I was just about to summarize, but I will allow Kamaluddin to quickly make his comments again, because I think he has something important to share. Okay, Kamaluddin, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As I said earlier on, the constitutional amendment, she was said, the bills has been sent to state for their votes. Actually, it's part of the state legislators. It is now in the states that they should vote for the local government administration, so that governors cannot appoint people just like that as chairman, like overseer or something like that. There has to be an election and there has to be transition. The bill is there for states to vote. Two, there is also a bill to amend amend the financial bill of the state, so that there won't be any joint account. Each local government will be send their money directly from the federation account, and then also they have their financial autonomy, nothing like a joint account. And then the third one as well, the attribute is for their own financial independence as well. It's also part of it. So now the issue is seriously, it's now issue of engagement. The bills is all in the House of Assemblies. I have copies of all the amendments, and we know governors will try to influence them to go against, to say they don't want their financial independence, they don't want the local government. So that's what we have been doing. I think it's part of the. I think we attended a program, it's Palladium program organized by another. I think I can't remember this organization. They informed about the bills, and they gave us, I think, a copy of the bills amendments. So I think it will be important if I can share it with Brenda. She can maybe share it across so that people can be able to see the amendments, and then we can be able to follow on our legislations to make sure that they actually voted for their independence.
Thank you very much, Kamaluddin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the question of quick question. Just sorry.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to quickly. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to clarify because now that he's talking about the bills. Okay, if you're asking if the constitutional amendment bills are the bills that have been asked for, yes, we can share them, because when I was noting the questions, I thought they were asking about bills from the state level. So those are the ones that I was referring to when I said it has to be the CSOs of the states. But if it's the constitution alteration bills that is being referred to, or anyone is looking for bills emanating from the National Assembly, then definitely we are very, very happy to share those bills. Just send us an email, or if you have Brenda's contact, you can call her, and then we'll email it to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just by way of wrap up, I think I believe we've gotten to a stage where we've got some very good take home from here. And by way of wrap up, let me just say that we've discussed a number of issues. I think we've addressed a lot of the questions. In putting down the report or the summary of this webinar, I think it should be in 4 parts. I would suggest. Number one, we've been able to identify certain best practices, and these can be distilled from some of our contributors, as well as some of the notes that Nkiru provided, some of the direction Nkiru provided in her presentation in terms of best practices. The second aspect is that we've been able to learn some lessons, practical lessons by practical examples shared by our participants here. And I believe that we should set those aside and list them. The difference between best practices and lessons learning, the lessons could include some of the things that we should not do. Examples of what we have done in certain areas or how we have not done them. And the third aspect is this issue of state issue. How do we deal with deepening accountability and deepening citizens' engagement at the state level? One of the things that have come out here is that do we have enough information on why accountability at the state level is weak? And I don't want us to come up with all sorts of reasons that the governor is dictatorial. Let us come up with evidence. What is the evidence base? What makes accountability in a state legislature easier to ensure in some places as against some other places? And by the time we do the actually digging deep, we'll discover that the causes differ from state to state. The fourth component of this is that we need to take some kind of feedback. We need to develop some kind of action points that participants should go away with. And Ibrahim, could you please mute yourself? Yeah. We need to develop some action points. And just to list a few, Number one, all civil society groups based at the state level should take an effort to build some relationships between now and let's give ourselves a couple of months. Build relationships between number one, the legislative, the administrative aspects of the legislature in your respective states. You know, you have legislative staff. Are we looking at building relationships with legislative staff, because it is through them that documents are printed, minutes are taken, committees are organized, that support for the legislature itself is provided. We also want to use our own selves to build relationships. How many of us working in state legislature actually share newsletters with the state legislature? How well do they know us? You know, it's a different thing of you knowing them. Do they know you? So you need to elaborate on what you do at the state level, and what you do that does not necessarily, you know, mean your engagement directly with the legislature. If you are a civil society group and you have been providing borehole for some people, let the legislature know. Document your own practices, document your own activities in a proper way, and share this periodically with the legislature. There is also the issue of collecting telephone numbers. Right now, we know we are going through a different time, but there are new people coming in. We can start building relationship between these new people as they come in. What are the telephone numbers? What are their email addresses? Another thing is this. You know, if you demonstrate that you care for that person, if we go into the attitude that all legislators, all those people get elected are thieves, all politicians are thieves, you know, it is very unlikely that they will open themselves up to you. We should be a bit slightly more open-minded. We should know that there are interests, you know, that bring if we society and citizens representatives get to be more interested in some of these local issues that drive some of our legislation, there's something motivating everybody to act in a particular way. And once you know what makes somebody tick, you are more likely in the position to influence such a person. The issue of autonomy of the states is very critical, and being abreast of the view of these bills. So, what I'm urging and what I'm suggesting is that maybe when we put this note together, each of our participants will take 2 or 3 points that they intend to want to do, particularly at the state level. I want to get to know, for example, all the state assembly meetings that are coming back. I want to get to know, for example, who is the administrative head of the civil service, administrative head of the legislative service. I want to know, you know, things like that. Then we come back and find out how much knowledge we have for plaque and is that look into the weakened level of accountability at the state level. So I want to thank you. Over to you, Brenda.
All right, sir. I just want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. From your feedback, I can actually tell that it's been extremely helpful. Thank you to Nkiru Zodi, and thank you so much, Dr. Adeshina Fabio Byron. And I also want to thank USAID Skill for the support, and then for all of you for actually staying even a bit more over time. I'm so grateful, and I hope that for the next series that you'd also be available. Thank you so much. And just in case you still haven't filled your evaluation or attendance, I'll put it on before logging off in the next 5 minutes. Okay, Nkiru wants to say something. Thank you, everyone.
No, it's just, again, thanks. I had posted Martins, thanks for the clarification. The bills you're asking for National Assembly bills. So I've posted the link to our plaque bills tracking platform. We have a bills tracking platform. If you can get information on National Assembly bills, you can also download the bills. And I've also sent a link on, look at the chat box, to the Constitution Amendment bills and the bills that were transmitted. Everything, we have a Constitution resources page. So everything you need to know about the Nigerian Constitution, including amendments dating back to 2010 to present, you can find it on that page. I've also shared the link. And if you go to our bills tracking platform, let me share it again. If you go to our bills tracking platform and you don't see bills to download, please feel free to shoot us an email and we'll try and see if we can get a copy for you. So that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
On that note, Brenda, you want to give us a word of thanks or something, or you've done that?
Yes, I think I've done that. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So I'll be logging off in the
Everybody
next
can
5
unmute themselves
minutes.
now if they want. Now it's time to unmute. Okay. Bye.
Please fill the evaluation or attendance sheets if you haven't done so, but I'll be logging off in the next 3 minutes. Thanks, everyone. And if you've already done so, you can log off. Thank you.